listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
All right, what is up, and welcome along to the Straight to Video podcast, the podcast that does its very best to dive into the journeys of some of your favorite musicians, actors, and creative people. And along the way, I'll try my best to sideline the conversation into chat about old school video shops and maybe some dodgy horror films. So today's guest was primed and ready just for that. Today on the show, I chat with LA Guns guitarist and touring veteran Ace Von Johnson, who joins me from his home out in Nashville to discuss his early introductions to horror films, horror conventions, and the friends he's made from the films he grew up on, his early steps into punk rock and touring, and we bring things right up to date with some LA Guns chat, who, if you're listening to this show on the day it airs, they're releasing their brand new album, Black Diamonds, today, April 14th, and you can find out all about it and how to pick up a copy over on their website, lagunsmusic.com. Ace and I have been back and forth since the launch of this show to try and get a chat in the diary, but after spending some time together in Nashville a couple of weeks ago over a couple of drinks with our friend and fellow podcaster Chuck Shue, it was great to come home and finally sit down and have this fun conversation which you're about to hear. This Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo is an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. You can always see it in the podcast episode artwork each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market. So please, if you can, check them out over at affinity.serif.com. Okay, not only is Ace one of the most professional and dedicated rock dudes out there right now, and as you'll hear, a die-hard horror fanatic, he is also a huge and passionate dog rescue advocate. So please, if you can, head on over to his website, acevonjohnson.com, where you'll find all the relevant social media links, and particularly his Twitter, simply at Ace Von Johnson, where he shares and reposts as much as he can to help these beloved animals. And you can also support Ace on his Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Ace Von Johnson, where he's regularly creating some great content. Right now though, please enjoy my straight to video chat with LA Guns guitarist, horror aficionado, and all-round dog lover, Ace Von Johnson.
Oh my God. Okay. Hey, sorry. I hadn't turned my computer on since I did a DJ gig, and it was set to all these different audio, whatever. And then I opened Zoom and it was, your app needs to update. And I'm like, come on. So sorry for the delay, man. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Good to see you.
You too, man.
Who's that in the background?
Oh, that's Mila back there just looking confused.
Just spaced out.
Yeah, she's full of CBD treats, so she's a little spaced.
Awesome, man. So how long you been back? What you been doing?
I don't know. I've been traveling intermittently, and that's kind of it. Just waiting for this LA Guns record to come out and hanging out with my dogs. How are you? Welcome home, right?
Yeah. I was just getting into the groove of Nashville. It always takes me a few days to kind of climatize and get a feel for the area because I'd never been there before. So now I'm back, I'm like, shit, I want to go back for like 2 weeks now and properly do it.
There's a lot to see, man. There's a lot of stuff to do, and no shortage of things going on. That's for sure.
Hopefully next year if I can get, because I got a pretty cheap flight.
Did you go to Heathrow?
Yeah, I got a direct flight. So it was super good.
Yeah, they're surprisingly, affordable, at least in my experience. So might as well come back and hang out.
Fingers crossed. I'd like to bring the wife over next time because I think she'd enjoy it.
Yeah, you definitely should.
Mate, I'm stoked we got to hook up and do this.
Yeah, me too, man. Sorry for the delay and everything, but glad to do it.
It was great to see you over the Rock and Pod weekend.
Yeah, that was a really fun weekend. I had a bit of intrepidation about just any social setting for me is always an uphill battle, but I had a really great time. I forget sometimes that I live in Nashville and I get out of the house and see people, and then especially combine it with an awesome event like Rock and Pod and the Jam and everyone like yourself who was in town etc. And it ended up being a really good time.
I mean, that was it for me, just like to meet these people. I mean, I knew a few people, I had a few guests on the show and things like that, but to meet people like Chuck, who I'd been friends with online for probably over 2 years now and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So just a great, we can call it like networking from a business point of view, but it's just a really good hang. It was cool.
Sure. Chuck's a good dude and good hang and a good chat. Obviously, you guys got wind of us hanging out and everything that night, a couple drinks in all of us, or some of us. Good to hang with you as well. Of course, that was a fun evening.
Are you much of a convention guy when it comes to like horror movies? Is that's right up there with music for you? I always look at some of the lineups at conventions in the States. I'm like, holy crap, they look like killer events.
Yeah, I haven't really done one in a minute, but there was a run of about 3 years where I was doing a horror con at least every 3 to 6 months. A woman was managing me who's like one of my closest friends, basically family. And she also owns, operates, whatever, a really great horror convention / music festival out of the Northeast called Rock and Shock.
Right.
And so we hooked up to do some business stuff, God, let's say 8 years ago. And I ended up becoming the sort of music director for the like all-star air quote jam band. And I mean, we had Randy Blythe from Lamb of God and Doyle from the Misfits several times, Ash Costello from New Year's Day, AC Slade, Jamie Josta, Ricky Rackman, Tim Capello from Lost Boys, all these great musicians and so on and so on. And I was in charge. I was going, okay, you're playing this on this song. And it was a handful, but it was awesome.
Was that like an after party thing or something that happened during the day?
So Rock and Shock is a horror con in the afternoons, let's say 10 to 6. And then from like 5 to midnight across the street in Worcester, Massachusetts at the Palladium, they have a 2-stage metal festival. Gina, the woman that runs this event, she'd have Rob Zombie, she'd have Ministry, Danzig, Guar, Lamb of God, whoever. This project, if you will, this sort of, jam band thing was called The Rocking Dead. It was kind of the brainchild of a photographer named Jeremy Saffer, well-known rock and metal photographer. I mean, like Megadeth or Lamb of God or Motionless in White, that kind of stuff. You see a lot of the bulk of those promo photos, press photos, magazine covers are shot by him. Amazing photographer and really good friend. And so we kind of put this concept together. And I think I did it for 4 years, 1 year remotely because I was on tour myself. But that was sort of how I got my in the convention circuit. And then between Gina and just people I met, I started getting asked to appear at other cons, Days of the Dead, Scares That Care. Sure, there's a few other, of course, I'm blanking. Chiller in New Jersey, sort of like set the precedent for that whole horror convention world. Even reading about it as a kid in magazines and stuff, it was really cool to appear at that. And yeah, so that was it. I did a bunch of them. I already forgot what you were asking about, but they're a great thing. Like Rock and Pod was awesome, but I'm also avid horror fan. I would love to get my foot back in the door there. And then the really wonderful thing that not a lot of people realize is that most of that convention circuit, I'm talking, the actors and the directors and the people that put it on, it's a very like communal group. Once you're in, you're kind of in. And so some of the people from that world have become my close friends. A great example would probably be Derek Mears, who's a fantastic character actor. A lot of people might inadvertently know him as Jason Voorhees in the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th. He was in 3 of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. He was a Predator. He was Swamp Thing in the new Swamp Thing series, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, beyond all his wonderful talents, he's probably one of the sweetest human beings I've ever met.
I think that goes across the board for a lot of the horror community as well.
Oh, yeah, completely. But I mean, I don't want this to turn to some laundry list of me name dropping, but just a lot of these people became my close friends. And it was nice to kind of network outside of like rock guys.
Yeah.
And then the flip side is I'd meet, Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street. Someone would be like, oh, this is AC's in Faster Pussycat. She's like, oh my God, I love that band. And you're like, oh, well, I grew up watching you in your movies. Like, right on, we should get a beer. Or you're like, okay. That's what I miss about the horror cons. And I'm sure a lot of the fans that frequent these conventions, especially the horror community, are kind of privy to seeing that. And I love it. I was just at 2 of them in the last year here in Tennessee. So great to see people catch up, again, name dropping, but like Doug Bradley and Zach Galligan.
All good dudes. I've met a few of them at conventions because I used to go to them all the time.
They're all great people. Bill Moseley, I consider Bill a friend, and Zach's a friend. I mean, it's such a trip. I imagine it's what fans feel like when they're engaging with musicians that they're a fan of. And I do the same thing too with musicians as well. But, it's like, whoa, we're buddies, but also like, dude, I have all your fucking records, man. Or like in this instance, like, wow, I have these movies on fucking VHS,
Yeah.
right? I have these on tape from when I was a kid, but your professionalism takes over and you go, yeah, that's cool. Anyhow, let's get that beer and talk about whatever.
So you got to know director and writer Adam Green pretty well over the past few years as well. He's such a creative force since those Hatchet films.
Oh, yeah.
How did the two of you hook up? Because he's like a hard rock fan as well. So was that the link?
I think Adam's favorite band is Dangerous Toys. And Jason McMaster, the singer, was at Rockin' Pod.
Yeah.
That was not directly the link. Actually, the link was Gina from Rock and Shock, not to be confused with Rockin' Pod, because she's from Massachusetts, where also Jeremy Saffer, the photographer I mentioned, is from, and where Adam Green is from. And so she knew Adam when he was just a young pup. And I think the crux of that relationship was basically Gina brought me, again, this was at least 8 years ago. I feel like maybe longer. She kind of brought me around to these sort of groups of people such as Derek, etc. And was like, this is Ace. He plays in this band. He's one of us. You guys would gel. And so that was actually how I met Adam and Derek. And it was basically simultaneous. I went to Adam's house for Christmas one year, and I've been on his show a few times whenever he does his Yorkie-thon charity event. Yeah, I just talked to Adam. It was his birthday a couple of days ago.
Oh, wicked. What's he working on at the moment? Do you know?
I honestly have no idea. And I'm sure even if I did, I probably couldn't say. But I think that one of the last things we talked about was like training, like going to the gym or something weird like that. So I don't know, but he seems like he's doing well. So whatever he's on, I hope it's something great.
He's always so creative. I mean, I'm always telling people they need to watch Digging Up the Marrow.
Oh, what a great movie.
It's amazing. I love it.
I like to turn people on to Holliston. I go, wait, it's okay. Do you like cheeky sitcoms? Yes. Do you like horror movies? Yes. Do you happen to like Guar at all? Or D. Snyder? There's this really great cutaway gag in an episode of Holliston where D. Snyder's talking about Tame Me Down from Faster Pussycat. And at the time, I was in Faster Pussycat. Anyone listening that's not familiar, I'll ruin the joke. But D is Adam Green and Joe Lynch's boss at this like radio station. He's the singer in a tribute band. He's not supposed to actually be D. Snyder. And so he's like, yeah, last night I went and saw Faster Pussycat. And the singer, Tame Me Down, gave me his beer. And they're like, who's she? And they're like, no, it's a guy. He's a singer for Faster Pussycat. And he goes, so I'm drinking the beer. And I'm drinking this beer. And I'm drinking this beer. They're like, okay, all right. So I showed it to Tammy. And he was like, that's fucking hilarious. And so I made a video of Tammy going, I'm drinking the beer and I'm drinking the beer. And I sent it to Adam and he called me. This was ages ago, but he was like, I can't believe you got him to do that. We're all fans. Everybody's a fan of something somewhere.
I always remember Adam Green telling a story about going to like Widowmaker gigs because he was such a like big rock fan. And so I was in straight away with his whole thing because it's like, oh yeah, it's just the same as me, just like a mega music fan. It's great.
Yeah. He loves the same stuff we do. And he's definitely, wears it on his sleeve, which is great, If
I'm right, you had something of a cool double-edged introduction to horror. Your dad showed you some films when you were really young, but is it your cousin is Mark Lester who directed some like freaking huge 80s films, man?
You know what's funny? His mom, my aunt, called me not 10 minutes before, and she's getting up there. She's not about getting up there. She is up there. She's 98. And so his mother, I shouldn't probably give out this information, it doesn't matter. His mother, my aunt, is the closest thing to a grandmother I have, or any parental figure. So we're pretty close. And she called me just before this. I sent it to voicemail because I was trying to open my computer up and get everything going. But yeah, that's my cousin.
He did like Commando, Firestarter. I mean, they're not tiny films. At least not for me.
Those are big ones. And for me, Class of 84 and the sequel Class of 1999, I was on set for a portion of that I must have been 7, but old enough to remember. And I had already sort of been indoctrinated, if you will, by my father, because all of my early memories of my father, who's long since passed, were watching horror films or doing something motorcycle related. But you kind of called it. Those were the two things that led me to appreciate horror at a very young age. I think I was watching the classic Universals and, like Day of the Triffids and House on Haunted Hill and The Tingler and all that stuff at 5, 6, 7 years old, and, had an early appreciation for stuff like Laurel and Hardy and all that stuff. This kind of gets lost on a lot of people today.
So your dad had a connection with William Castle, the film director behind House on Haunted Hill. Did he live near him or something?
Yeah, so my dad passed away when I was a teenager, but this is no way for me to confirm. But both my parents are Angelinos, as am I originally, and it's rare to meet anybody, especially in the music industry, that's from LA. And so my mom used to go to the Whiskey A Go-Go in the 60s and see the Doors and stuff like that. My dad went to some high school in the Valley, and I'm getting another story mixed in here. I was going to say his girlfriend in high school, supposedly her father, and of course I can never confirm any of this, but this was the shit that he would tell my sister, myself, and admittedly our grandmother, his mother, never denied any of it. So I have to assume some of it holds true. But his girlfriend in high school's father built Robbie the Robot from Lost in Space. But before that, when he was a little boy, I'm trying to think of the year, 59. So he was 11 or 12. Apparently, he lived in the same neighborhood as William Castle, the Tingler House on Haunted Hill. So, he was known in his time. And apparently when he would complete a film, he would invite all the neighborhood kids over to screen the movie for these kids before the film came out.
The kids, not the parents.
Yeah, legend has it. My father saw this movie, I guess 10, 11, 12 years old, and it scared the shit out of him. Now, that being said, House on Haunted Hill for the time is kind of scary. And I love it. I have some of the artwork tattooed on me, and I have a ton of the original theatrical posters in the house. I'm getting really long-winded here, but that's kind of where all this started. I didn't decide it was cool or something like that. And as horror became in vogue, I feel like with the, advent of Hot Topic and the internet and all these things, and bands like, whether it's AFI or whatever, becoming sort of cool, in vogue again in the late 90s, I think it became sort of hip to like a lot of this stuff. And of course, I think however you get into horror is awesome. I'm not here to gatekeep anything, but I just definitely remember people being like, you're a weird nerd. And then 3 years later, they were all like, I like Jason Voorhees. And I'm like, yeah. Or I like Bela Lugosi. And I'm like, yeah, you didn't feel like that last semester, bro. So as a kid, I mean, so that's that.
Which was the era of horror you initially got to, let's say, call your own when you were maybe at the video store with your dad and you're like, I saw this film in Fangoria, or somebody told me about this film. Was there anything in particular?
God, anything that was like, and I say this with air quotes, anything that was, quote, kid friendly. I mean, like Critters,
right?
Night of the Comet, Return of the Living Dead.
Night of the Comet, I friggin' love, man. I love that film.
Oh my God,
It's got such a great vibe.
Sort of subtle social commentary there.
Yeah.
Anything from 1985 to like 1990 that caught my eye. Like most of us of a certain age, I think anything that had a colorful, interesting looking VHS box, there was definitely some stinkers I got. And then I was raised by a single parent, by my mother. So frequently she, between jobs, have me run into the video store and she'd be like, go get 2 videos and come back. Don't get anything I won't like. And so it would be like Fox and the Hound on top of Hellraiser. I'd be like, I got 2 Disney movies. Don't worry about what they are. I'm lying. And I get like, what was it? Got the fucking magnet on my fridge. Faces of Death. Shit that like 8-year-old kids should not be watching, right?
You Americans, you got lucky. All that shit got banned for us until like the late 90s.
Yeah, what was it, like the video nasties, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
All of them are terrible. Most of them are anyway.
Yeah, most of it by today's standards is just laughable. I mean, some of that Faces of Death stuff is terrible in a bad way, but like what parent is worried about Return of the Living Dead 2? You know what I mean? It's just basically a kid's movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love all that stuff. Ghoulies 4, or anything like that. I was just a sucker for it.
Which is Ghoulies Go to College? Is that 3?
Yeah, I think that's 3 or 4.
Fantastic. Where was your local video store? Because I know you moved to San Diego when you were a teenager, but did you grow up actually in the Hollywood area?
No, I grew up in the Valley in Sherman Oaks and coincidentally Thousand Oaks. A lot of oaks. And Sherman Oaks is probably, by the way the bird flies, about 5 miles from Hollywood. So I was aware of it. But I mean, when you're 10 years old, being an Angelino, I remember sitting in my mom's car and she was running an errand. This car pulled up next to me and 2 distinctly tattooed men got out of it, and as one now myself, it was probably like 5, 6, 7. And I was like, whoa. And my mom came back in a moment later and she was like, do you know who that was? And I was like, I'm going to guess this was by my age. This was probably 1988, 89, 90 at the latest. And I said, no. And she goes, that was 2 of the guys from Motley Crue. And I was like, oh, and I knew the band name at like even a young age. I didn't really think about it like that. But what I realized later in life was that my mom bartended at a place in the Valley called Jack's. And Jack's was sort of the Rainbow North. It was like the rock hangout bar of the Valley. And the guys in Motley used to come in there all the time. And so my mom didn't listen to that. She was like Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles. So she was like, oh, these young punks in some silly hair metal band. But all that stuff was on my radar. So just the LA thing, having family in the industry as a little boy, having people come up and be like, is your mom around? Here's my business card. I'm a casting agent. Like that kind of weird cliche shit. LA stuff, it's all cliche, but most of it is cliche because it's all kind of how it is.
Where was the video store you used to go to then if you was in the Valley?
Oh, yeah, that was your actual question. So I told you I had a bunch of coffee. The two that we went to, I couldn't tell you what they were called because I was a little boy, but they were independent, typical, like run by some snot-nosed kid. It was like what you would imagine, a ton of kids movies, ton of action movies, and a ton of horror movies. I don't think my mom was really into anything. She was like, oh, I'm just going to put on, what's the Julia Roberts movie where she's a prostitute?
Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman. She said, I'm just going to watch Pretty Woman again, okay. And then she'd go to bed and I'd put on, Ghoulies 14 or Jason Takes Manhattan, whatever I had picked up for the week.
What about seeing horror at the cinema? Over here, films were like strictly 18, so you had to be that age or older to get in. But in America, you had like R movies where if you went with a parent or guardian, you could get in. Do you remember any early trips?
No, my dad he didn't really take me to a lot of movies. I'm sure we went a handful of times. I don't remember anything. What I do remember, and I'll see if I can not tangent again, is I remember discovering Beetlejuice, probably on VHS, because that would make sense. That came out in 88, so I was 5. And I think Edward Scissorhands came out in 90, so I was probably 9 or 10. No. In 90, I would have turned 8 that December.
Making me feel old.
I think I'm older than you.
No, I got years on you, mate.
Oh, I don't know. I just turned 40, but I feel like I'm 100.
Yeah, I'm 50 next year.
Oh my God. Fuck, man. I thought you were like 37 or something like that.
Cheers.
Yeah. So horror in the cinema. I glommed onto Beetlejuice. And so I remember hearing that the director was putting out another movie. My mom took me to see Edward Scissorhands for my birthday because I'm a Christmas baby. That was the earliest memory that I have of seeing something. And, Edward Scissorhands isn't a horror movie, but it's got elements.
It's gothic.
It's gothic. Vincent Price is in it, right? Conversation over. So that was my first memory of seeing something kind of dark in the theater. I don't think going to the cinema, if you will, was really big for me in my family, at least until I was probably like 13 or so.
Well, yeah, I mean, you had that kind of few-year gap before, like, you had the big blast of, like, the late 80s Elm Street and Jason films, but then there was kind of a 4 or 5 year gap until Scream came out, and that kind of kick-started it all again.
Yeah, and that you brought up a good point, is I remember going to see Scream with some friends. I was probably in 8th grade, 9th grade, I don't know, young high school. And so that became a sort of social thing on occasion. But that was because it was part of that grouping of like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, these like tween horror movies where it's like, okay, we're going to get 8 people that are clearly in their 30s that we're going to cast to be 16. But by that point, I was already waist deep in my horror movie fandom.
You moved to San Diego, I think, when you was 14. I guess that would have been a pretty cool time. Was that kind of like mid to late 90s when that whole like Offspring, Lit, Sugar Ray, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones thing was blowing up?
Oh, Boss Tones, yeah. God, this is a can of worms. I'm going to try to tread lightly. I moved to San Diego. It would have been circa 96. So I was in between 8th and 9th grade, maybe. I'm class of '01. I graduated 2001, which technically makes me a millennial here in America. So people make fun of me for that sometimes. I moved down there at an interesting time because Blink-182 was the hugest thing on earth within a year of me getting there. And all of a sudden, punk rock, air quotes, was everywhere. And by way of Nirvana, by way of Green Day, by way of Offspring and Bad Religion, so many of these bands, again, get the bucket for the name dropping. So many of these bands now were bands I grew up listening to as a young man that are now, I wouldn't say contemporaries, that's the wrong term, but are buddies, peers maybe, I don't know. So again, talking about fandom earlier, it always still is like, wow, like, you're talking to guy X from such and such band. Like, dude, you come to town, we got to hang out, let's go get a cheeseburger or something, right? But at the same time, my 13-year-old self is like, I was listening to this, before I was even old enough to shave, and so I love that. Yeah, so back on topic here. That whole sort of like second wave or whatever you want to call it, punk rock, whatever we're calling it, was in full effect. And San Diego was the hub of a lot of this. I mean, you had Unwritten Law, Blink-182, POD, Sprung Monkey, Pivot, Phoenix TX, all these bands that were sort of doing their thing.
Did you rally against that? Was you going for like the old school punk rock?
I had gotten into punk rock inadvertently by having an older sister who's 13 years my senior, but if she asks, she's not that old. When I got into music, it was pre-internet and I liked what I liked. I still like what I like. I mean, my record collection behind me is about 12 or 1300 pieces deep, and it spans from fucking Enya to Cannibal Corpse and everything in between. It wasn't until I got into high school that someone said, if you hang out with us, you can only listen to what we listen to. And these like little music-based cliques. There were like the ravers and the metal kids and the goth kids and the punk kids and then the other punk kids and then the jock rock kids and the this and the that. And I was sort of an outcast by all of them, but moved about freely in a somewhat socially inept way. And I just didn't give a shit about any of that. And so I liked punk rock. And by punk rock, I mean what was handed to me as a middle school kid pre-internet. It was like Minor Threat, Social Distortion, The Damned, The Misfits, Black Flag, you know, The Cramps, the kind of stuff that you would expect. And so when Pennywise and Blink-182 were going, we're punk rock, I was going, kinda.
Kinda.
You know.
But like, it's just a second wave of it, isn't it? That's all it is.
Yeah. And of course, I love both those bands. Don't get me wrong. I still love Blink-182. It just took me a minute.
But I think you said something really cool thing. I don't know what it was you said you heard say, but listen to your favorite band's favorite bands.
Yeah. I think I stole that from Joe Strummer. I learned kind of early on that you might love Blink-182, but like it's music, it's art. It's like subjective as fuck. So it's not my place to be like, I was the guy getting told you're a poser and all this stuff. There's a great sidebar story about a bully that used to beat me up and called me every horrible thing in the book. Poser, you fucking this, that, and the other thing. And then I ended up joining his favorite band.
That's some proper hard rock karma, that is.
I have that story twice over. There was a jock in high school. This was when I was going to Poway High, which is the high school where Blink-182 is from. And for a few years in my early teens, I lived in Poway, which is a suburb of San Diego. And this guy, Joe, I'll spare his last name, used to pick on me. He wasn't that bad, but used to pick on me. And his favorite band was Unwritten Law. I, years later, would join that band.
If only you were Facebook friends then, you could have messaged him and tagged him in a poster or something.
Yeah, that didn't exist. And then there was this skinhead guy named Billy that's no longer with us that was actually just merciless. You know, he used to like throw apples at me and call me horrible things that I won't even say out loud. And his favorite band was the US Bombs. And that's because his best friend was a guy named Chris Sklamowski, who I'd work with years later briefly, who is Dwayne Peters' nephew, singer of the US Bombs. So he was really into this punk band. And then years later, I joined that band, blah, 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 blah. There's a morality tale in here somewhere, but I'm getting off topic. So doing high school down there was great because there was a burgeoning punk scene. There was a venue in San Diego called Soma. Anyone that's from Southern California is probably familiar with it. Everyone played there. Alkaline Trio, Blink-182, Social Distortion, everyone. They had a big stage and a small stage, and it was a convertible movie theater, and it was just awesome. And I got set up with a buddy of mine named Chris, who's still like my big bro now. I talk to him all the time. When I was 14 or 15, he had a band in San Diego called Agent 51, and they were kind of like the big pop punk band that never broke. If you like Rancid and you like Green Day, you will fucking love this band. And they were huge in San Diego, and Chris's friend was my high school sweetheart's big brother. And so I met him through my girlfriend's big brother, and he was like, oh, you like the Misfits and skateboarding? And I was like 15, and I was like, yeah. And he was like, we should hang. And I was like, this 20-year-old guy who's in this punk band wants to hang out with me. I'm in. Okay, we're getting beers. We're going skateboarding. We're cranking out Black Flag on a boom box. And then he was like, hey, my band's playing the Elks Lodge in Poway. Do you want to like help us move gear? And I was like, I'm 15 or 14. I was like, do I want to be a roadie? I'm in.
This is the greatest thing ever. Yeah.
Let's go. And so that was how my music career inadvertently started.
Amazing you said that. They offer you the job to like shift some gear and you're like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. I think one of the like magic moments for me was like a local band invited me to come and take some photos at a gig. We got to the gig and it was cancelled, but that was like one of the most amazing experiences of my life, that I was hanging out with this band in this van. It just felt amazing. It was so cool.
Yeah. Isn't that the best though? I mean, it's when it's a organic sort of introduction like that is always amazing. And I'm getting really long-winded on this, but it was really a great experience. And I worked I say worked. I roadied for these guys. I must have been 15 going into 16. And within a year, I started my own band. And coincidentally, on my turntable right now is a split from the bands Youth Brigade and Swingin' Utters.
Oh, Swingin' Utters is my friend's favorite band of all time, pretty much.
No shit. Sometimes I forget what records I have. And I go, oh, looking for this one album. I pull it out and I go, oh, what's this next to it? This is the third Swingin' Utters record on the turntable in the last 24 hours. But they did this split in 2000 and I don't know. Look, there it is. 1999. Okay, they did the split in 1999. And so when this kind of made the rounds, it was 2000. I'm in my first band. And the first big show I ever played was my band, Agent 51, and then this tour package, Swingin' Utters and Youth Brigade. And I remember being 17 years old and playing a show in front of 500 kids and being like, this is what I'm doing.
Signed and sealed.
Yeah, and that was it. That was kind of how my being in the punk rock scene in San Diego coalesced into what has inadvertently been a career.
Yeah. Some of the people that have had a huge impact on me as a musician were like hired guns like Ryan Roxy, Kerry Kelly, who I think you're friends with.
Oh, I love KK.
Did you look up to similar people when you were mapping out a career as a professional musician? You talk of like networking to be important, and you're obviously very good at building a brand around yourself. Was there anyone in particular that inspired that?
Oh, man. Yeah. The biggest person to really kind of inadvertently steer me in that direction is a guy named Todd Youth, who's no longer with us. Todd was my mentor. I met Todd when I was 20, 21, and coincidentally, his long-term bass player was Johnny Martin, who was in LA Guns with me. And Todd started working with people that were sort of in my peripheral as I went from being like hometown hero guy from 17 to 19. I was singing and playing guitar in my own punk band that sounded kind of like vaguely like Rancid, and then booking shows, working with people that I had respected, and then eventually got to the point where people started calling me going, hey, One Man Army from the Bay Area is thinking about auditioning guitar players. Do you want to come audition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And I ended up joining a band called Madcap out of Burbank, started touring and meeting all these people. But I met Todd when I was probably 21, and by the time I was 22, 23 or so, I wasn't really listening to a lot of punk rock anymore. I was sort of expanding into what we would just call rock. It was mostly because I kind of felt like I had sort of conquered the like 4-chord arrangements of most punk rock songs. And as a guitar player, I wanted to expand. And so I was, like listening to Guns N' Roses and listening to, anything that all my punk rock friends in my late teens told me not to listen to, all those sellout bands. And Todd sort of came at a crucial point where I was like, this guy started Murphy's Law and Warzone and all these hardcore New York legendary punk rock bands, and then sort of transitioned into Degeneration and then Danzig. And then, he filled in for Motorhead. And then, the point where I knew him most was when he was working with a producer named Julian Raymond. And so he was getting brought in to play on Cheap Trick albums and Glenn Campbell albums and all this diverse stuff. And I'm 21, 22-ish going like, fuck, man, this guy went from being in these punk rock bands to like playing on huge albums. He actually, I don't know the whole story, but I think he played on a My Chemical Romance album, uncredited. And so like all this stuff.
And he still looks cool.
And he looks cool as shit. I still wear bootcut pants. I'm wearing bootcut pants right now because I wanted to look like James Hetfield as a kid. But also, I remember Todd wore them, like the skinny, tight jeans that were boot flared at the ankles. And I was like, dude, where do you get those pants? Those are cool. And he really steered me on this path of...
made you think outside the box a little bit as well. Like, you didn't have to be pigeonholed.
He did that, and a lot of guys did that. You mentioned Ryan and Kerry Kelly. These guys all kind of started in a rock band and stayed in rock bands. And I respect Ryan and Kerry very much. I definitely early on, it might even be within my reach here in this part of the office, somewhere is a pick pack of Kerry Kelly's that he gave me in 08, 09.
Has it got some warrant picks in there?
I think it's all just Kerry Kelly brands.
Sushi picks or something like that.
There might be some. I became very aware of making an identity for yourself outside of the bubble that you exist in kind of early on. I think a lot of it just comes from looking up to people like, Henry Rollins or even Glenn Danzig or whoever that were like, okay, yeah, so me from this band, but beyond that, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, which inadvertently led to where I am now. You talk about branding and stuff like that. I think it's healthy for people to exist outside of just what, it's like Tracy Guns. Like, yeah, he's Tracy Guns of LA Guns, but like he does other stuff. He's got other music projects. He's got other interests. So it's good to water those seeds, if you will, beyond just the brand.
Just a quick scan through your Twitter feed. Very few would think it was from a rock and roll guitarist. You're more of a rescue dog and pitbull activist. I presume you've been like a dog lover all your life, but when did you realize you had this platform to help animals and it became extra important for you?
Probably about 10 years back. It was probably like 2011 or 12. As a couple of years into being in Faster Pussycat, the sort of younger guy. And at the time I was very, probably 26, 27, 28. And there's way more to life for musicians than the whole, you've been in bands. The whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing gets old and tired real quick. Not that we don't all enjoy a little bit of all of it, but to me, it was just like, well, what can I do that I find rewarding? And I've always been sort of a dog person. And I just started doing little things, not in private, but without advertising it. And then as social media slowly crept into every fucking aspect of our daily life, I just realized that it was more rewarding to get a message from someone saying, hey, that dog you shared yesterday got adopted or whatever, than it was to have someone be like, wow, I like your tattoos, or whatever it is. And so I just sort of focus on that. And unfortunately, I detest personally, for me, I hate social media. I don't like it. I don't want to be on it. I don't want to, it's a necessary evil. And for some respects, it's great. It's also manifested a lot of terrible people to sort of get together. And whether it's any topic, I'm not even going to get into it, but any topic, if you hate peanut butter, there's a fucking Facebook group for you, and so much of that dark cloud of anything overshadows any interest I have in being on it. So I pretty much just keep it 95% to like networking and reposting and sharing and tagging and trying to do what I can. I mean, I deleted Facebook during the pandemic. I'll never go back on there. And if I had my druthers, I'd get rid of Instagram. And really, the only thing I post to Insta is albums that I'm on that come out. And then I'll share some dog rescue, or I might, hey, Rob and I are at this record store, check it out. But I don't really do much in regards to the whole like public, like you said, like band guy. It's not a lot of that. It's mostly like this dog in Sheboygan needs to be pulled. Can someone please share?
I think it's fantastic, man.
Again, like I said, it's more rewarding.
Mentioning albums you've been on, we can't leave without talking about the new LA Guns album, Black Diamonds, which is out April 14th. Was it 2018 you joined the band?
Yeah, it was 2018. I have been on stage with Tracy and Phil separately several times prior to joining the band. In Phil's previous incarnation of the band, I must have got on stage with him at least a dozen times over the years, just as like a drunk friend playing on Ballad of Jane or whatever. They kind of courted me for maybe 9, 10, 12 months or so. I can't remember. And it was just myriad of things between, band politics, and I was busy and they were busy. And in 2018, I'd already been in Faster Pussycat for 8 or 9 years. And so I was sort of hesitant to jump ship, or at least put my toes in someone else's swimming pool. And I was going through a really awful breakup, and they had a 10-day run or 2-week run, and I had some time off. Their manager called me again and was like, hey man, circling back. And I said, yeah, I'm available. Let's fucking do it. And the manager was like, we want you to come down and audition. I was like, you guys have been calling me for the last 8 months. You either want me to do it or you don't. I'm not coming down to audition. I'm not learning all these fucking songs for you guys to sit there and hold up get the fuck out of here. So I went down and I jammed with the rhythm section, one of whom is Johnny Martin, who I mentioned working with Todd Youth. And I've known him since I was about 21, 22. And the drummer at the time, Shane Fitzgibbon, and Adam Hamilton, our on again, off again band member, fifth Beatle, producer, engineer, family member, was there sort of overseeing. We went through maybe 10 songs. Tracy came down. We went through the same batch of songs and he was like, okay, you're good. And we had like 2 more days of rehearsals booked. And he goes, cancel them. What's the point? You're good. We're fine. So that was kind of how I got in. That was 2018. We got a new record coming out, Black Diamonds.
Is this your second recording situation with the band?
Yeah, this is my second album with the band, although it depends who you ask, because I'm pictured on The Devil You Know. That was already sent off to be, mastered or whatever by the time I came in. And sort of as a gesture, they put my likeness in all the promo photos for the album.
I'm on a Bullet Boys album, but I didn't play a single note.
There's a Faster Pussycat European album that has my picture on it.
I think I just got lucky and it was the good photo shoot at that time. That's the coolest one.
It's funny how that happens, right?
I think you've got an ex-Bullet Boy on drums at the moment, haven't you, Sean Duncan?
Yeah, we've got Sean Duncan, an ex-Bullet Boy in the band. More importantly, from Odin and DC3 and a bunch of other stuff. Sean's a great guy, great drummer. But yeah, so my second full-length album, third release, if you count the live album, which I kind of do, Cocked and Loaded Live, and then we did an EP as well. So in 5 years, I mean, 2 studio records, a live album, an EP, some singles. That was kind of one of the things that drew me in was Faster Pussycat. Tammy really doesn't put much out ever. And I wanted to be in a band where we put out new music. And so that was one of the things that drew me in with the LA Guns Camp. And I joined for that little run of dates, and I never left.
Any plans to come to the UK, do you think, on this album? Has been any mention of it?
I haven't heard anything on that topic. I don't know. Ultimately, I always tell people, I go, the internet knows before I do. And so in this instance, you would hear before I would.
How have you found coming to the UK as a punk rock fan?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, just, for the history, whether it's London or Berlin or any place, Lodi, New Jersey, any place where a band that I'm a fan of, Belfast with the Stiff Little Fingers, just anything where I'm like, this is where this fucking band started. But yeah, I mean, the amount of music that's come out of the London area, and I say London as if, I'm there, I'd have no clue. But to everyone here in America, you might be like, well, they're 20 minutes out of town. And it's like, yeah, but for all intents and purposes, let's just call it London. Whether it's Generation X or The Damned, or I'm trying to really think deep here. I mean, really, like everything we love, rock and roll, comes from the UK. I mean, the Beatles, the Stones, fucking Led Zeppelin, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, The Clash, The Jam, the Buzzcocks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you guys really have it awesome over there as far as music history goes.
See, we say the same about you. I want to go to Paramus, New Jersey to find out where Trickster came from, but...
Okay. Fair enough.
That's my flip side on it. No, I get you. I love just going, even like places like Liverpool. Like the history is so freaking rich there. It's unbelievable. I
don't think I've played in Liverpool, but I've probably played in the UK a good 12 to 15 times over the years between various punk bands and Pussycat, etc. But yeah, just so much history. I mean, that's why I love, or what I miss about going to Europe. People here, it's like, oh, this place is old. It was built in 1964. And you're like, that's not old. That's not shit. One of my favorite places in the world is Edinburgh, Scotland. Rich history there, not necessarily music wise, but I mean, like some of the bars and pubs and venues, that's history.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you get to come over on this new LA Guns record. Surely it's got to happen, man.
I hope so too. Yeah, we got to hang.
Ace, it's been fab to chat with you, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob. I appreciate it.
Big shout and thanks to Ace Von Johnson for a really fun talk right here on the Straight to Video podcast. Pick up the brand new LA Guns album Black Diamonds, which is out now, and keep up to date with all their tour dates over at lagunsmusic.com. And to find out everything you need to know about Ace himself, head on over to his website acevonjohnson.com. All is busy in the world of straight to video outside of this show. Things are going great over at our 80s video shop in Alfreton, Derbyshire, which is just 10 minutes from junction 28 of the M1. Please swing by and visit at the weekends from 11 till 3 p.m. Or if you can't make it over, please drop by our YouTube page and subscribe, as there's some really fun content which is growing on that page. And Chris and I love all the interaction you give the fun videos which we're trying to get out to you each week. This and over 230 episodes of the podcast can be found at stvpod.com, along with some STV music, videos and merch. And as it's 10 years since the release of the first straight-to-video EP, I hope to be launching some brand new merchandise to celebrate that, so please keep an eye on the website. So that is all for today's show. As always, I appreciate you listening, and I'll be back next Friday with a brand new episode. But until then, always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all very soon.